I don't know.
Welcome to Friday Focus. We have a special session tonight. Gulalai is not with us, and Izaman and I will be hosting this tonight. We have two guests. First is our special guest, Senator Afrasiab Khattak Sahib from Pakistan. And then we have also a super special guest, Peymana Asad. Khattak Sahib, everybody knows, he's a former senator, he's an activist, he's a human rights defender, he's an expert on regional politics. Peymana is a counsellor in the UK for Harrow. Is that right, Peymana?
Yeah.
She's the first elected official, I believe, of Afghan origin in the UK.
Yes.
One of the youngest. She's under 30. And we are so honored to have you, Peymana, with us today on this rather tragic occasion. She's from initially a refugee family, a child of war. Would not be unfair to say. And I think Peymana moved to the UK at the age of 3. Is that right?
Yes.
And now she's representing us, Britons, in an elected office. Let me begin with condemning a few recent happenings in Pakistan. One of which was, I believe, a suicide bombing of a bus carrying Chinese engineers and some paramilitary Pakistani personnel. 9 Chinese and 3 or 4 Pakistanis died. It was horrific. We are sending our prayers and best wishes to the killed and injured and their families. And the other horrific incidents, the news of which broke today, was of the daughter of Afghanistan's ambassador to Pakistan. The news broke today, but the incident happened yesterday afternoon at about 2:30 in F7 Markaz, I believe, heart of Islamabad, very busy area. She was abducted and then thrown in some other location 6-7 hours later. From what we hear, she was tortured, physically tortured, with injuries that she sustained. So these are the two things that we're going to discuss. Peymana, first, if I come to you as an Afghan woman, what were your first thoughts? There's a war raging in Afghanistan. The Taliban, by the looks of it, are sort of overrunning. Some reports are exaggerated, but they take territories. Those territories keep getting taken back, and then this blowback which is coming into Pakistan, this attack on the Chinese, and then the ambassador's daughter being taken like this. What are your initial thoughts?
I think the first thing, obviously, to say is that this was very shocking when I read it online, and my initial reaction was to ask if it's true, because that's how shocked I was. This is a Afghan ambassador's daughter, so this isn't just an ordinary Afghan. This is someone who's related to an Afghan official. And that was my first initial reaction. And the second reaction of mine was, I was afraid. That's quite frightening and scary as an Afghan woman to hear this, especially as I've traveled to Islamabad before, and I never felt unsafe in Islamabad. Even though the people around me were very wary of my, where I would go and make sure that I wasn't on my own. It was, I wasn't afraid. And so I was just thinking, what did she go through? I was thinking about her more than I was thinking about the politics surrounding it. I was thinking about her, I was thinking about her family, I was thinking about what she went through in those 6.5 hours, and how she must be feeling now that ordeal is over. But also the fact that people were taking her name so easily on Twitter and saying this and that and all of those things. And I just thought, where is the dignity, where is the respect for this young woman and the ordeal that she's been put through? The other thing that, you know, obviously there was a lot of anger, because the comments that I was reading online was initially of denial from the Pakistani authorities, that this didn't happen, she must have been with a boyfriend, you know, all of this kind of stuff. And this just leads back to this point of how women are always blamed, regardless of the ethnic, you know, nationality aspect of this, that this is an Afghan woman in Pakistan. This is the point of women are never believed when they tell people about incidents that occurred with them. And that made me even more angry. So those were my initial thoughts, but obviously, you know, I think, where is the accountability, and will there be any accountability? There have been so many incidents in South Asia, not just in Pakistan, in Afghanistan, where women have been abducted, kidnapped, physically assaulted, and there's been no justice delivered to these women. The perpetrators have not been held account.
Well, I think I understand where you're coming from, but this particular abduction, I believe, has a very large political angle to it. It's not just merely an assault on any given woman, any woman. You know, this is very political in nature. Coming to you, Khattak Saib, but before I actually ask you to sort of comment, let me read out a report that I received with regard to Silsila, was her name. She's 27 years old, the Afghan ambassador's daughter. She was taken at about 2:30 in the afternoon, and the first contact with the family is at about 6 p.m. She went to the Blue area to a shop near Tehzeeb on a taxi from her house. The address is given. I'm not going to repeat that. After buying a gift for her younger brother, when she took a cab for going back home, another man got into the taxi after a few minutes. When she protested to the driver at this other man entering the car, that passenger started to beat her up and said that your father is a communist and we will not leave him. She lost consciousness. So Peymana, this is sort of to you, because you're wondering what she went through. Apparently, she just lost consciousness and cannot recall anything after that. She regained consciousness around 5 to 6 p.m. And on inquiry, a passerby told her that she's in F7. It was some road with no shopping or residential area nearby. Her hands and feet were tied when she regained consciousness. She took a cab to F9 Park, as she knew that landmark. And from F9 gate number 3, she called some person. The person's name is given, who picked her up on an official vehicle. So I'm assuming she must have called somebody at the embassy. The dupatta she was wearing had a tissue paper and 50 rupees note tied to it with a message saying, your turn is next and communist. The SHO of Kosar and teams being sent for identification of the place as described, and a separate team is assigned to check cameras. Her medical examination was being carried out at the time of this message. Her shoes and mobile phone are missing, and a male's shoes were put on her feet when she was found. That's about it. Khattak Saib, I'd like to invite you to comment. I'm not sort of posing a specific question, but really would like to understand your thoughts on an ambassador's daughter getting abducted in the capital, in one of its busiest markets, in broad daylight. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it is a shocking incident. First of all, because it happened to an ambassador's daughter. It's the host state which is responsible for the security and well-being of the diplomatic staff of other countries. Yeah. And particularly when it comes to Afghan diplomats and their families, they are very closely watched by the intelligence agencies. So to say that their movement was not in the knowledge of the agencies, I don't buy that, because I know, as a matter of fact, that they are pursued, they are followed wherever they go. So that is that. And the worst thing is that our government goes into denial in both these incidents, in Dasu and in Islamabad. The first thing was denial. So
Hafiz Saeed as well, remember? Hafiz Saeed as well.
Yes.
The Johar town blast.
That also. In the beginning, they said it was something else.
Gas leak.
So that's how, you see, and this denial has backfired in both cases. Chinese have really very strongly protested, and their prime minister had to call Pakistani prime minister. And they also have sent their own investigators. It shows the trust deficit between the two countries emerging out of this terrorist incident. And with Afghanistan, of course, it's really very bad, because it has come at a time when both the countries have very tense relations, and sort of targeting a young lady who has no role in politics, and she's not involved in any political or official activity. Targeting her is very unfair and very cruel by all those who have been part of this whole victimization. Well, it reminds me of another abduction a few years back, when an Afghan Consul General was abducted in Peshawar in 2008. It was September 2008. Mr. Abdul Khalik Farahi was Consul General in Peshawar, and he was abducted in broad daylight in Hayatabad from his house on his way to his office. You see, I knew that background, so I'll just quickly refer, just to give you an idea of the type of incidents that happen, because that's an old incident. I have all the information about that. So you see, he was designated by Afghan government as ambassador to Pakistan, but Pakistan government was not responding. Abdul Khalik was a great friend of mine, and he told me that the government of Pakistan has not responded to the official letters of Afghanistan. So I raised it with my party's president, ANP's president, Asad Wali Khan, and he raised it with the then Prime Minister, Yusuf Raza Gilani, because we were coalition partners in the government with him. So it was a normal thing to raise it with him. And the next day, he called Asad Wali Khan back and told him that, well, he has dug out the file. Unfortunately, it was not presented to him, and he has accepted his designation as nomination as ambassador, Afghan ambassador to Islamabad. So the next day, I phoned him and I told him that I got this information, and probably I laughed. I said, "You are going to Islamabad and leaving us in Peshawar." I lived in Peshawar in those days. You see, the next day, the very next day, when he got out of his house, he was abducted. So those who did not want him as ambassador, first they tried to block his agreement. When because of political interference, the prime minister sort of saw to it that it is accepted, then he was abducted. And then he remained in Waziristan in the captivity of terrorists for 2 years, 2 long years, in Pakistan, inside Pakistan, a designated ambassador of a friendly neighboring country. So you see, and coming back to Islamabad, in Islamabad recently we have had many incidents. We saw, Matiullah Jan abducted, and everything was videoed. There is complete video of the people who abducted him. It was presented in the Supreme Court of Pakistan, but you see, nothing happened. Then we saw Absar Alam being shot at. He was injured. It was an attack on his life. He luckily survived. And there were videos, so we could see the face and our faces of the people, but nothing happened. And the third incident was Asad Ali Tour's abduction, another journalist, poor journalist, whose house was invaded by people who went inside and tortured him in his house. And there was no investigation, nothing came out of it. And now this comes this shocking thing with Afghanistan. But this is more important because it is happening to an ambassador's daughter, and a country with which Pakistan has tense relations these days. So, I mean, even if we may not want to say it, but it is very natural that the first idea or the first perception will be that it is perhaps to target the country. So you see, 2 days back, the Afghan vice president accused that Pakistan had threatened of some military activity against Afghanistan, some attack. And now comes this. So you see, these are very sort of dangerous developments. And we need diffusion, we need leadership. Where are our leaders who could just intervene and set things right and assure our neighboring countries that if the individuals responsible for it will be brought to book? I mean, this is very, very significant. Otherwise, the whole region is going to dogs.
Sir, I have a quick question for you. When has it happened that anyone who has done this kind of a crime has brought to, a court of justice, or, any accountability has been done from Pakistan's side? I was just looking through it. And in 2013, there was an Afghan consulate from Quetta. He was abducted, later released 2 months later. You mentioned about 2008, and now this incident has happened. If this thing would have happened in any other country, it would have been like headlines, and people would have been shuffled around from here and there. But from Pakistan's side, it's just quiet. Or we see like people.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. You see, I presided over the provincial organization of Awami National Party from 2007 to 2013, 6 years. And I saw more than 800 of our activists getting killed. And the Taliban used to take responsibility. Now the state could not defend us. As if that was not enough, they didn't bring a single accused to book. Not a single person was brought to justice, brought to the court, and there was no case. So it was very simple. It's suicide bombing. So the bomber has died, and we do not know anything. It is terrorism. You see, and even some generals, retired general, you remember, he said this is collateral damage when he was commenting on APS Peshawar massacre in which children were killed. So unfortunately, the government, the state has mishandled the whole thing, and it has encouraged, this impunity has encouraged criminals and the crime.
I would like to bring Peymana back into the discussion. Peymana, you must be sort of in touch with your countrymen back in Afghanistan. What sort of sentiment exists at this point in time with regard to what's happening with the situation with, the peace negotiation and the US having left, and Pakistan's role at this point in time? I mean, what is the sentiment in your country of origin?
So I think, it's really important to understand that Afghans have now found a voice on the global stage, a voice that they were denied 20 years ago under the rule of the Taliban. They were plunged into darkness with no access to the internet, no access to outside communications. And now the sentiment is that for 20 years, Afghans have been openly saying who is responsible for those who are committing crimes against them, those who are sponsoring, funding, and supporting the Taliban against the Afghan people, and the thousands of civilians that are losing their lives. They finally feel, from speaking to so many people on the ground, that their voices are there on the international stage, but nobody is listening, and nobody's taking action, and there is no accountability for those who are sponsoring and funding the Taliban. That's one. And the second is obviously that there.
Would you like to name them? Would you like to name them? Who is sponsoring and funding the Taliban?
Pakistan, the Pakistani intelligence service, the Pakistani government. I think even if you ask a 5-year-old child in Kabul, he'll be able to tell you that. There is a lot of anger, that over the last 20 years, that as much as Afghans are saying, we're extending our hand out for peace, that hand is not being taken in a serious way. They're being told one thing in meetings, that yes, we support the peace process, yes, we'll bring the Taliban to the table, but behind the scenes, we see Taliban fighters being treated in Pakistani hospitals, the dead from battles in Kandahar, from Ghazni, from Helmand coming into Pakistan, into Waziristan. But I think the most important thing to understand on this situation with the ambassador's daughter, is that this seems like an intimidation tactic, like it's sending a message to Afghans, especially Afghan women, that if Afghanistan does not abide by what the security agencies in Pakistan want, then they can do this again, that they will do this to another Afghan woman or another Afghan official's daughter or wife or whoever it is. And so that is a big thing in Afghanistan at the moment. There is huge amounts of anger, but what I was surprised at was the measured response from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Afghanistan. The statement that was put out was incredibly measured. Khattak Saib talked about leadership, and I think at this moment in time, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Afghanistan is showing a little bit of restraint on this matter, and I was shocked at how much restraint that they're showing. But I think because, as Khattak Saib said, the relationships between Afghanistan and Pakistan are very tense at this moment in time. It's very important for one country at least to show some restraint, and I think Afghanistan is doing that because so many people are dying on the ground. But I think the other thing to understand in this specific, having spoken to so many people, is they see this as evidence that the Taliban are losing the war in Afghanistan, because the Afghan National and Defense Security Forces have been retaking a lot of districts whilst they're not being reported in the press and the media. The Afghan media has been reporting a lot of the retaking in Bamyan, in different parts of Nimroz, for example, in Jalalabad. And for those that I've spoke to today, they say to me that this is evidence that the Taliban are losing the war, and those who are supporting them and sponsoring them need to use different tactics, basically, of intimidation.
Very quick question, and then Annie, if you'd like to ask. I just want to, you told me about anger. There's a lot of anger in Afghanistan. Tell me, do you think the Afghans discriminate between the government and the people of Pakistan when they're angry?
Yes, I do. I think if you follow the statements of Afghan officials, and if you follow the statements of some of the senior civil society leaders in Afghanistan, they are very clear that they do not hate the people of Pakistan, because they understand what is happening inside Pakistan, especially with the Pashtun, the Baloch, the Sindhi people, minorities, Hazaras.
Are Pakistani people also seen as victims in Afghanistan?
Yes. I think that it's really difficult when you look at the leadership and the government. Obviously, they will talk in terms of speaking about the government, and when they speak about Pakistan, they speak of Pakistan as a whole. But I think if you look at the people-to-people relationship, it's very different on the ground between ordinary people. This is not political actors. This is the ordinary people of both countries. We share we share language, we share culture. The Durand Line, as Afghanistan does not recognize the Durand Line and claims that side of Pakistan, we share a lot. There's a lot of common shared values and shared culture. So I think that's to one side, but I think that that distinction has been made by previous leaders. The previous president is very clear on that. The current president is very clear on that. There's Afghan civil society activists who have tried. I know I've worked with Afghan women who have reached out to Pakistani women from the other side to try and work on peace talks and peace negotiation issues. And they've been stopped by the Pakistani security agencies. They've been discouraged. So I think the people-to-people connection is strong. People want peace. It's about the governments of the two countries and their bigger political great games that are involved. I was saying to my mum this morning that, you know, this incident with the Afghan ambassador's daughter, it's always women who are brought in the middle of men's war, because this is a man's war at the end of the day. It is men fighting other men, and it's Afghan women who are being used as cannon fodder in the middle at the moment. And so I think that this is very dangerous, this moment in time. And if Pakistan does not bring the people who are responsible to account, I think then the measured response that we've seen at the moment from the Afghan government and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs might be very different in the future. Who knows?
Annie.
So much, Peymana, for your sharing your thoughts with us today. And I feel the women in Pakistan also, we feel the same way. And we feel that it should be, you know, we are with our sisters in Afghanistan, and we strongly condemn that women should not be brought into this kind of, you know, violence. And I took it as a like violence against women in whoever has done that in Pakistan's territory. And it is responsibility of the Pakistan government to brought whoever has done that. They have Safe City project. Whenever something happens, they say, oh, the cameras are not working. But having said that, when I applied for the first time for my visa for Afghanistan, leaving Afghan embassy meant that there were some people who were trailing me throughout until I went and flew to Afghanistan. So they cannot, you know, tell us that they do not know who those people were. So this is different. This is 2021, and they cannot, you know, put a stop, like, you know, they cannot silence us women because they have brought us into this. So strongly with you on this. And I would like to ask Khattak Saab here now. What do you think what would happen now? Do you see any
Yeah, Annie, so just before you question him,
yes, please.
You know, just before you put your question to Khattak Saib, I would say, look, if we don't find out who did this, then we know who did it. Yeah. And to Khattak Saib, as Annie's question, and I will add mine, Khattak Saib, Azad Sayed was, you know, her question, what do you think is going to happen? And then, as you know, Azad Sayed was in Kabul recently. What reports did he bring back? And who do people think was behind the bus attack in Dasu, as a result of which China is not just angry, it is very differently angry this time. It is publicly angry. China does not do its diplomacy so openly. It's normally, whatever they do is behind closed doors. It's such a strong reaction. What do you think was going on in Dasu? What news does Azaz bring? And as Annie said, what do you think is going to happen next?
Well, an hour ago, I was part of a show where Azad Sayed was also speaking. He was one of the participants, member of a panel. And he came from Kabul yesterday after spending a week in Kabul. And he met different people. He interviewed leaders. He met traders, young people, women, people from different provinces. So his report was that absolute majority of Afghans believe that Taliban are being imposed on Afghanistan by Pakistan. And even if the Afghan common people have complaints against their own government, it doesn't mean that they really support Taliban. He said they believe the Taliban are being imposed on them from outside. It's part of a hegemony which is threatening Afghanistan's sovereignty and independence. So this was briefly his report from Afghanistan. And let me just also share with you my impressions of the last few days. You see, unfortunately, our government has been very irresponsible. Our ministers have been talking about their support to Taliban. they sort of confirmed the Taliban are there, the interior minister said. The foreign minister praised Taliban as very smart, intelligent. Even president of the country, Mr. Arif Alvi, was not behind them. He also tweeted that he hoped that Taliban and their countrymen will overcome the security crisis, etc. So as if Taliban were already a government for them. So this is very irresponsible, and it shows that what Pakistani leaders have been speaking was not true. You see, they said they have changed the policy. They said they have given up on this strategic depth, but actually it is the strategic depth for which Taliban is an instrument. And of course, I'm very confident that Taliban can't really rule Afghanistan, but they can destroy. It's a fighting machine. It has no politics, no political capital, no political vision, but a destructive force. They're destroying Afghan infrastructure, killing intellectuals, target killing intellectuals, women activists, human rights activists, journalists, civil society people, professionals, sort of pushing Afghanistan back into dark age.
IT infrastructure, dams, electricity poles. I don't even understand. If they want to govern the country, they should, a normal sort of outfit should want to inherit the infrastructure that exists, but they're going about actually destroying it.
And they are doing this after entering into an agreement with US, with whom they have they claim they had launched a jihad against United States. They have embraced America, but they're fighting common Afghans, Afghan Muslims. So you see this. But one thing is very, I mean, a silver lining in this otherwise bleak situation, that common Afghans really have known, they have understood the situation. They have come to understand that they were being used as cannon fodder in the name of jihad. So there is no type of polarization, ideological polarization, which existed in Afghan society in 1980s. It is not anymore there. So that's a silver lining. Afghans would really would like to carry this war on. And secondly, you see, coming to Pakistan's Afghan policy, you see, our three military chiefs in recent years, General Kiani, General Rahil Sharif, and General Qamar Javed Bajwa, all the three have been talking of course correction. They said they have given up this strategic depth policy and they're correcting Pakistan policy. Now, let me just very briefly explain where the correction was needed. I believe there are three areas in which they could have corrected the policy, Afghan policy of Pakistan. The first was sort of befriending Afghanistan as a country, as a people, or choosing and picking a party or a group favorable to Pakistan. So you see, they in 1980s, they supported Gulbuddin Hikmatyar's party, his Islami, and it was their priority in when they were distributing weapons and other resources for the war. But you see, when the war was over, after some time, they dished him off, dished that party. It was jettisoned, and then they started this Project Taliban. So then a new project. Now Talibans are their most allied ally after that. So now when the generals say that we have changed the policy, so where is that change? Because all the non-Taliban Afghans are considered as enemies, as the abduction of the Honorable Ambassador, Afghan Ambassador has really shown that, you see, they are being attacked and targeted. The second thing was to grow out of this geostrategic and get into geo-economic. Because that is something which both countries could have worked together, and it was in the interest of both countries to cooperate in economic development. But you see, the three neighboring countries of Afghanistan from the north and the west have built railway lines connecting Afghanistan with their own countries. For example, Uzbekistan's train enters Mazar-e Sharif. Iran's train enters Herat province. Turkmenistan train has reached the border, although it has not entered Afghanistan, but it has touched Afghan border. So you see, but when it comes to Pakistan, we haven't built a meter of railway line because that is not our priority. Even this 40 miles road connecting Torkham to Peshawar, which was supposed to be dualized after 1992, 28 years. It is not done. It is not dualized. It's a single track. The old road still exists. So, because it's not priority. The priority was to Talibanize Afghanistan. Pakistan's focus was on Talibanization. And the third thing which could have been changed was the use of soft power. You see, Pakistan and Afghanistan have so much in common. There are so many commonalities to which Peymana Jan was referring. You see, there are so many commonalities, language, culture, religion, customs. You see, so many things. For example, Khushal Khan Khattak is the most outstanding Pashtun classic poet in Pashto language. Afghans also regard him as their national poet. So if we could hold a seminar on Khushal Khan Khattak in Nowshera, where he's buried, where he was born and where he's buried in Nowshera near Peshawar, I mean, it would have been a great success of relationship between the two countries, but it never happened. Probably our president and prime minister do not know where Khushal Khan is buried. Similarly, Allama Iqbal as poet, Pakistan regards Iqbal as national poet, although he died far before Pakistan's creation. But in any case, because of his ideas, but he's very well respected in Afghanistan because he was a very profound Afghanologist about Afghanistan. He has said very profound things, very good things. He knew Afghan character and Afghan ethos. You see, so again, you would not have heard the name of Iqbal in relationship between two countries because we know more Taliban commanders, their names and their activities than Khushal Khan Khattak or Allama Iqbal. You see, this
we
is
also know
this
Uzbekistan and Uzbek history better than the Uzbeks.
Better than Uzbeks themselves. You see, my point was that, you see, where is the correction? When our leaders say we have given up the policy, so they have not given up. They want to, but it is a zero-sum game. It is a suicidal policy that Pakistan need to change. Now, I will very quickly come to this Chinese thing. You see, again, Pakistan was in denial. It was very bad. China had to call. Chinese prime minister called Pakistani prime minister. Now, this is again against the courtesy of the neighboring countries. You see, Pakistani prime minister should have called them for condolence and assuring them that the crime is being investigated and the culprits would be brought to book. But it did not happen.
Simple.
They had
Very
to call.
simple.
They had to call, and they had to tell us that they are sending investigators because they were clearly disappointed in the attitude of the government and state of Pakistan.
And what does that say about the sovereignty of this country when someone else tells you we are sending? They're not asking. They're telling us we're sending investigators.
Very, very true. Very true. You see, in a country where, for example, Osama bin Laden, Yusuf Raza Gilani raised this question in parliament after Osama's operation against Osama. He said, who had given visa to Osama? On which visa was he living in Pakistan? Do you remember that? So Osama.
This is when they had accused Hussein Haqqani of giving visas to Blackwater, and he said, "Well, who gave visa to Osama bin?" I remember that.
OBL. Now, then came Americans for operation without any visa. So you see, if you become a soft country where terrorists from all over the world can come, then the state would also follow them. You see, so as they said, we should look at our own house and put it in order, and we shouldn't blame others. We should externalize our own problems. So I think it's because of this Afghan policy, because Talibanization, there's a new great game. There's a new Cold War because the U.S. government and this government and the previous administration also called China as a threat, as the main adversary of the United States, and the Communist Party of China as the main enemy of the United States. So you see, and they are not hiding their intention of containing China. They have activated this quad, what is called these 4 countries, US, Australia, Japan, and India. And now they are bringing in Korea and other countries. Even they have dragged G7 into this. US is calling its allies in Europe to also join US in containing China. So it's becoming a new Cold War. But you see, fortunately, the word is not bipolar or unipolar, it's multipolar. And in a multipolar world, it's not easy to really instruct other countries to do what one big power wants them to do. But in any case, as far as Pakistan is concerned, unfortunately, we have always been addicted to the idea of becoming a frontline state. And it seems
a satellite of sorts.
It's a very dangerous addiction of becoming frontline state. And it has destroyed Pakistan. Pakistan, a country with great potential in economic development, is a bankrupt country, almost bankrupt. We are standing on the crutches of international finance institutions. IMF and Arab countries and China, all of them are giving money, otherwise Pakistan would be bankrupt. So unfortunately, it's because of these policies. And what Azad Sayed was saying in the previous show in which I participated, Azad Sayed is a journalist, an investigative journalist. He said he has yet to deeply investigate and look for evidence, but he said the first doubt went to ETIM, Eastern Turkestan Islamic Movement, an organization which is supposed to be constituted from Uyghurs, Turkish population of Chinese Xinjiang. So you see, this is a nightmare. This is something that really threatened Pak-China relationship in the past. When these terrorists were in Pakistan, some of them were killed in Waziristan. Some of them were taken out in drone attacks, others were taken in other activities. But now again, it's resurfacing. That is really very, very serious.
And isn't it right that, before I hand over to Annie, isn't it right that ETIM is actually cooperating with the Taliban, and it's among that alphabet soup which is operating in Afghanistan against the Ashraf Ghani movement? And I'll actually, Annie, how about we go with 2 last questions? It's been a really lovely session, long one. If you want to ask Peymana anything, maybe one question to Peymana and one to Khattak Sahib, and we'll let them go. I'm so conscious that it's really late at Khattak Sahib's end. Annie?
I think we can wrap up here and ask the same question to Khattak Sahib and Peymana about this whole like anti-Ashraf Ghani, this whole squad you were talking about. And then
okay. Peymana, do you have any comments? Because I have a specific question for either of you, and then we'll end. Do you have any other comments before that?
No, I just wanted to reiterate the point in terms of the view from Afghanistan in terms of what's happening at the moment in the current escalation of violence. Afghanistan and the Taliban. I think that it's really important for Pakistanis, I mean, this is a Pakistani audience, I'm guessing, to understand that Afghans see this as a way that Pakistan wants to colonize Afghanistan. They link this back to the British Empire. They link this back to imperialism. They link this back to 1947, the division and partition of India. And so I think that Pakistanis need to do some soul searching inside and trying to understand that, not in a way where we're saying that Pakistan shouldn't exist or Pakistan shouldn't be a country, but rather to understand how did this country come into existence and why is the policy the way that it is and how is it detrimental to the region? Because at the end of the day, there should be a vision for the region. And my vision for South Asia is one like the European Union, where there are no borders and people are allowed to freely move and work and live wherever they choose to. You know, it is my dream to sit on a train and go from Uzbekistan, Tajikistan to Afghanistan to Pakistan to India. And if that dream is realized one day, then I think that's when we will have achieved peace in the region and people will live with dignity.
What a beautiful dream. I agree with you. I'll segue this. your comments into the last question to Khattak Sahib, your comments with regard to imperialism and etc. in Pakistan's designs. Khattak Sahib, would it be fair if I said that Pakistan has tried to find strategic gaps in Afghanistan for decades, and all these policies were in pursuit of that goal? But at the end of the day, looking at what's happening in Pakistan right now, looking at our border agencies, have the Taliban not found strategic depth in Pakistan actually instead?
Yes, it is partially true, because they did operate it from Pakistan for long years. And the factories, but basically their origin is Pakistan. It's a Pakistani project. You see, the factories that produce them operate in Pakistan. There are 36,000 religious seminaries, 36,000. And most of them are not even registered. They're not registered. You see, and there is no state control. So you see, they're producing cannon fodder and they're sent to Afghanistan. Taliban is basically a demolition squad. It is not to rule Afghanistan, it's to demolish Afghanistan as state, as nation, as society. You see, they have exaggerated this religious aspect of Afghan Pashtun identity. You see, Afghans, Pashtuns have been Muslims for the last 1,000 years.
Yeah. Uh-oh.
So okay. So Afghans have really been Muslim, but now they're exaggerated the Islamic part of identity to weaken the Afghan part. And that's what Talibans are meant. So they're destroying physical infrastructure, they're destroying intellectual infrastructure, they're destroying Afghan state. So you see, so that Pakistan will be able to turn Afghanistan into a protectorate, a sort of an appendage, an expanded tribal area, like FATA, expanding FATA to which is not possible. I'm very confident that it can never happen. But you see, it's a suicidal effort, and it can destroy both the countries, God forbid. It is possible for both countries to get destroyed in this process, in this madness, in this insanity, which is Pakistan's Afghan policy.
I think it's important to remember that Afghanistan isn't the Afghanistan of the 1990s. You know, it's a different country now. Millions of girls have been educated, millions of boys have been educated. There's a professional class in Afghanistan that's very different to the Afghanistan that the Taliban or Pakistan's ISI found in the 1990s. It's completely connected to the world. There's voices on the global stage. They've refound, you know, their footstep on the global stage. And I think trying to pull back Afghans from that, I think there's going to be a real fight on the hands of whoever wants to do that.
Exactly. I totally agree with you. But let me just add that, you see, they're afraid of this new Afghanistan. Recently, this Tulu television the chief executive, Mr. Najafizada, Lutfullah Najafizada Sahib was here, and he interviewed our foreign minister. And you see, our foreign minister appeared to be quite clueless. You see, he couldn't respond to questions. And he really, our elites are not amused. I mean, they say, oh, this new Afghanistan, not like old Mujahideen to whom we would lecture. And they would just bow down their head before us. Now they question us, people who reason with us and talk on the basis of facts and history. So I think I agree with you. I'm very confident. I go to Afghanistan very frequently. I know it's a change of Afghanistan. Even for Afghan elites, there has to be realization that it can't be ruled in the old way. It's a new country altogether, new society altogether. And for neighboring countries also, for the world also, there has to be realization. Unfortunately, in Pakistan, we are stuck with an elite, which is also cruel to its own country. You see, inside Pakistan, our three-time elected Prime Minister, Mr. Nawaz Sharif, is in exile in London because he was overthrown and he was jailed. And if he steps in Pakistan today, he will be imprisoned again. So, and so many other, I mean, particularly then Pashtun and Baloch, these PTM cadres, Ali Wazir is in jail. There are other PTM activists, Hanif Pashteen and others who have been in prison for years now. So there's a regime of repression in Pakistan, and the same policy is reflected in this hegemonic policy towards Afghanistan, which is also, as I already said, a bankrupt policy, doomed to fail.
On this note, thank you so very much. Do you agree, Annie? Thank you so very much, Peymana, Asad Saiba, and Khattak Saib. Really, really appreciate your time. Really appreciate the fact that it was all last minute put together, and you were so gracious. And we had a wonderful discussion. I think Khattak Saib has said these are suicidal policies. Peymana is saying, please rethink. But I think, you know, we are just as much occupied as you are besieged, Peymana, by the same people. And thinking is not one of their sort of fortes. They just decide and they do. And as a result, we've seen so many tragedies, not just in your country, but in our own. However, we should end on a hopeful note. I hear from both of you, our guests, that it's a changed polity. There will be resistance. We will be with you in spirit, if not in, you know, physically. There's that much one can do, and hope for a better future, and hope for your dream that it comes true one day.
I hope so.
Thank
Then
you.
all of us can come together on that train.
Yeah.
Thank
I
you.
have a dream, right?
Talking to you, all of you. Thank you.
Thank you for your
Thank
time.
you so much. Thank you. Annie, we can stop recording.